Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday, and welcome to session 2 of Coaching Klatch, led by Dr. Maggie Kang. We're so delighted to have you all join us here today, and hopefully, the things that Dr. Kang talks about and what we talk about as a group help you in your personal life, your professional life, help you achieve your goals with living with rare disease or caring for someone with rare disease. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Maggie Kang.
Hey there. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. So, yes, this is the second of a three-part series, and the topic today is a new way to think about change. And this is once again connected to the overarching theme of learning how to move forward in your life, living with rare disease. So, just quickly about me, I think a lot of you were here before. So, I'm Maggie Kang. I'm mom of Nell, who was diagnosed with NMOSD when she was age 9. By training, I'm a physician and I certified to become a life coach when I recognized the critical role that well-being would play in Nell's recovery. And bringing those coaching tools into our lives was really transformative, not only for her, but for our entire family. So I really wanted to bring some of those concepts here to you to see how it could help you to keep y'all moving forward in your lives. So let's get started. I'm going to talk for about 12 to 13 minutes, and then I'm just going to open up the floor to anybody who wants to share or ask questions or receive any coaching. This talk is going to be about why we have a tendency to resist change and how we can leverage our change circumstance to move forward. So the reasons why we often resist change are these. It requires a loss of something, and it brings on the uncertainty of the next. So for me, when Nell was diagnosed with NMO, the loss was her robust health. And the uncertainty was living with rare disease and all of the possibilities of relapse and what else could come down the pike. So this was really hard for me to accept. And so I resisted, as many of you guys know from my TEDx talk. So change can come in very large ways, like when Nell was diagnosed, but change can happen in our lives in very small ways too, or smaller, I'll say. And this is an example of something that maybe you all have experienced as well. An example of a relatively smaller change was this. Nell used to get IV rituximab at Children's National Hospital every 6 months. And typically she had the same nurse that gave her her infusion. Her name was Akila, and Nell kind of looked forward to seeing her at this time. So when we arrived once for her infusion and we discovered that Akila was no longer there and Nell had to deal with the new nurse, this was a change. And although on a smaller scale than the diagnosis, it was still a change that made us all sort of contend with the loss of the familiar smile and the familiar touch of Aquila. And it brought on the uncertainty of whether or not a new nurse would be able to do the same thing. So that's just an example of how change can occur in our lives in both big and large ways. So putting this into the context of our primitive brain feels the safest when things are familiar. And so any kind of change bringing uncertainty alerts our primitive brain about the possibility of danger. And it can feel as intense and as panicky as if we're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. And that is exactly the way I felt when Nell was diagnosed with NMO. Can anybody relate to that feeling? I would imagine so. So it is normal to feel scared when change comes upon us because of our default tendency. Our primitive brain wants to always feel safe and embrace the familiar. So once again, change means loss and uncertainty. So when this happens, it's important to give ourselves grace to feel scared and to resist at first, because we understand our brain's tendency toward this default habit. Now, change also brings upon us this grieving process of sorts because we have to let go of the old. And so when Nell was diagnosed, and when many of you all were diagnosed, the change was the loss of your previously healthy self. So it would make perfect sense why you would resist accepting your new sick self. So that is all to say that this is somewhat within like a normal sort of framework of our sort of a human brain tendency. But now that we understand why our human brains have that tendency, we also do need to face the fact that change is constant. And it's actually neither good nor bad. It just is. We can't control change, but here's what we can control: our response to change. And you guessed it, the way you respond to change is by way of your thoughts. So instead of fighting the reality of change, you can leverage your change circumstance to grow and keep moving forward to fulfill your greater purpose. I'm going to give you a quick analogy about a lobster. So just stay with me here. Similar to all animals in nature, lobsters know change is constant. And again, it's neither good nor bad, and they all know how to respond. Lobsters are sea creatures with soft, fleshy bodies surrounded by a hard shell covering. As their fleshy bodies grow, the shell becomes too tight and too confining, so they have to shed their old shells, and they literally actually like bust out of it. Between that time of shedding their old shell and finding coverage by their new shell, they are vulnerable to predators. And this period of vulnerability is uncertain. And during this time, lobsters are eaten by predators about 10% of the time. So one would think that a lobster would have every reason in the world to resist change, right? But a lobster knows that the period of vulnerability, that uncertainty, is the cost of growth and survival. And they can live up to 100 years and grow up to 4 feet long. Isn't that crazy? So humans also need to learn to grow and move forward because that is what is necessary for our survival. And this is a reason why we're all here, so we could all keep moving forward to discover that purpose. So now, if the lobster did not continue to grow, it would have suffocated in that smaller shell. So lobsters keep moving forward to survive. And that is why accepting change is important, because adapting to change is necessary for growth in life. So what does resisting change look like? It looks a lot like controlling a situation to keep things the same, which, as many of you might recall, was the story of my TEDx talk. I couldn't accept the loss of Nell's robust health, but try as I might to keep things the same, the obvious reality of her disease eventually sunk in. And as I hindered my process of moving forward, I was kind of killing myself with mental anguish. So when we're in it and we want to accept change to move forward, how do we do it? So similar to the last session, the answer, or at least one of the answers, is in the power of our questions. So for me, a question that I could have asked, I didn't actually do this at the time, is how can this change help me develop the skills to be a better caregiver? Or what skill would I need to gain to be a better mom in this situation? So asking powerful questions, once again, opens us to the possibilities, to the ways we can respond to a changed circumstance. So like in poker, being dealt an unfortunate hand happens in life to everybody. This doesn't mean that you have to lose all your money. And only in retrospect can I tell you that getting dealt a quote bad hand were the opportunities of greatest growth for me. When Nell got sick, the change deepened my humility and my humanity. By being in the hospital and seeing all the caregivers with their sick kids and the nurses caring for Nell and everybody else gave me a different perspective on why we are all here on this earth. And I developed a personal strength that helped me believe that I could create something useful and powerful from my experience. I helped Nell edit her amazing book and, helped her get it published. I ended up giving a TEDx talk, something I never thought I could do. I learned about coaching and enhanced all the relationships in my life. And I connected with the Admire Foundation, which literally opened up our world. So none of this could have happened if I wasn't dealt my bad hand. So, in summary, you now know why your brain has a tendency to resist change. You also know that adapting to change is necessary for growth and survival. And even if you feel like your change looks like a bad hand, you can still leverage your change circumstance to grow and move forward. Now, in conclusion, I'm just gonna leave you with this one last little story. I was thinking about Christine Ha, and I know many of you know her and probably have met her at the various events, but we had been watching her on MasterChef. And as many of you know, she's blind from NMO, which is arguably a bad hand, right? But she leveraged that changed circumstance to become a master chef. So I had seen her on an interview, and what she shared was that her blindness actually brought her the gift of heightened taste and smell, which she leveraged in her cooking to not only earn that coveted accolade of master chef, but now she has opened multiple successful restaurants in Texas. So that's just the last little thing I want to share with you. So I am done with what I'm going to talk about. So I'd like to open up the floor to you all to really share, ask questions, receive coaching, and specifically if you want to talk about a change in your life that you're struggling with.
Maggie, I have a question for you, and thank you
Yes.
for all of this wisdom. It really is so helpful, especially what a wonderful way to start your weekend with.
Yeah.
But in parallel to what you were saying, I do often feel like as humans, we have this tendency to always, sort of lament on the past,
Mhm.
not be not be fully present, and be so anxiety ridden about the future because uncertainty causes so much anxiety. So, how much of what you just explained about being resistant to change do you think has to do with, I think, our general inability or maybe resistance to be in the present and appreciate the present instead
Mhm.
of focusing so much on what we can't change from the past and what we certainly can't control in the future?
Right. That is our default human tendency, right? I think we all tend to do that, which is, I guess, the reason why people are always like, oh, you should just like live in the present, just stay in the present. But I think that that is exactly what I think our primitive brain does, because I think those are all ways to avoid dealing with what is actually happening in the present, because in the present, we might be offered a change that we don't want to contend with, that loss. So I think, like, to answer your question, maybe this is where you were going with that, is really just to become aware that this is our tendency, and that, to ask ourselves again, what is it helpful to us to actually live in the past or to have anxiety about the future? And like, where can we impact our lives in the most sort of powerful way? And I would suggest that it was in the present, and in thinking about like what is actually here right now and what can I ask myself to leverage myself, I mean, leverage my changed circumstance to move forward. So I guess like it would be easiest to like talk about a very specific example if you wanted to offer one, or if somebody else did, but it's again, I'm I think bringing that into my situation, like when Nell got sick, all I wanted to think about was how she was like this active, healthy kid in the past. And like, this is what I wanted to hold on to. And so obviously that's in the past and is not my actual reality. So doing that really hindered me in moving forward.
Do you have any like tips and tricks that we could quickly pull out of a toolbox when we find ourselves, this is something I am definitely victim to. I get really worked up about things that I can't change from the past, having NMO
Yeah.
and all of these things. I'm sure we can agree, not really knowing what the future holds, where I almost forget to just be happy to be here and to be in the now. So like, do you have any tips?
I guess asking yourself questions. Sorry, was someone going to say something? Sometimes it's really just helpful for me to notice that I'm doing it. Just that alone is such a powerful thing. I think it's hard, like when you're not familiar with these concepts. And so it sounds right and it sounds good that I'm telling you, right? But then you go back into your lives and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? So it is, I think, if you're going to do it on your own, having a journal and just starting to notice and flip back into your pages to see how you've been thinking about a certain situation and if that's been helpful to you. And I think it really just goes back to asking yourself questions is, like, why am I thinking about it this way? Not with any kind of judgment, just be like curious. That was an interesting response, or why did I do that? Or why am I living in the past? What's happening here? And if you can come up with answers to that, would be really helpful to you. And if not, again, like talking to either a coach or a therapist, I think could be really useful.
I want to comment on something that my mom, I think, told me a while back when, as a tip or something. Um, she told me to kind of do like a third person narration of my brain, basically, of what's going on in my mind. And I was reminded of this when I was at my sleepaway writing camp because one of the prompts was to write like a memoir from the third person. And I thought it's a very interesting perspective because it takes you away from it gets you out of your own head and makes you just be the observer without any judgment, and it's really helpful. And I know, Mom, you talked about like doing it in a funny like accent or in a funny voice or something to just like get you out of your head, so
Oh, thank you. I love that. I love when I share stuff with Nell and she actually like really applies it in her life. But yeah, that's like the same type of thing. But I guess getting into sort of a playful mindset about it can be helpful too. Yeah, as if like you're sitting in an audience and you're seeing the play happening and you see yourself on stage and you're like, why is that person doing that? Like that is not helpful. And she's just making your life so much worse, which is, of course, sometimes we do that. But seeing it from a third person can be helpful just to kind of make it simple and somewhat playful.
No, you're such a good kid. Well, you're not even a kid anymore. You're like a teenager, I guess. Yeah. We have some new faces here, Maggie.
Nice.
If this is your first time joining
Mm.
the coaching Klatch session with Dr. Kang, can you introduce yourself and maybe say where you're from? Anyone?
I think someone unmuted, but we can't hear them. But I think she's using the Jill Sharp
Yes, I know. I'm
thing.
hoping we can change your name once I figure it out. What's your name? We see you. Oh,
Oh,
we
yeah, I
lost
think we
her.
lost her. That's okay.
And then Cindy Wang, you're new here. Welcome. It's okay. People are shy.
Yeah, that's okay. She's back on, but I think we're having
Hey,
trouble
sorry.
moving her.
I was getting ready in the morning, so I will share my video in just a second. But yeah, I'm actually a physician. I'm a pediatric neuroimmunologist. I hope I'm available to participate because I think, so much of my time spent with families, I just want to, have better ways of,
Oh,
having them think about change, you know, like actionable steps. So I really appreciate, the discussion so far.
oh, thank you for being here. That's like, it's such an amazing thing that you're doing for your patients.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's very inspiring that you're taking the time on a Saturday morning to learn more about how you can help your patients in ways other than clinical care. Incredible. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
Anyone else? I feel like one of the Jillian Sharps is trying.
Yeah, I see her. I feel like she's unmuted a couple of times. It's okay. Oh, I lost you again. So you know what? I had the opportunity to actually correspond with a couple of people from the first session on email, and I actually did two coaching sessions, just short ones. And something that came up was this idea of what I'm going to call compassion fatigue. I know it's a term that has been created. I don't know what the actual definition of it is, but I think the idea is somewhat obvious, right? Like you are feeling compassion for a lot of things and it can exhaust you. And so I guess I could talk a little bit about that and see if anybody has any questions about that. That just seems like a theme that has been sort of recurrent in some of the correspondences that I've had. So in this community, I would think that this would actually be a very relevant topic, and maybe it applies more to the caregivers, but it can also apply to the patients. So I have this new way of thinking about compassion fatigue, and I was going to actually write a little something about it, but let me just share that with you right now and see if this resonates with anybody here. So I felt like one of the people last week was talking about how they felt like every time they saw something that they felt bad for, it was just like exhausting and they didn't feel really good about it. Or when people want to help other people on the Facebook chats that, they don't know what to say and they don't feel good about what they've said. So over time, it's like this feeling of like wanting to help other people, but like feeling not so good about it. And so I thought about explaining this in terms of like units of compassion, because I feel like sometimes we think, we should have like an infinite supply of compassion that we're just going to offer to every single person that comes along in our lives. But that isn't, I think, like the reality of things. I think you can get drained fairly quickly. And there is actually, I think, a lot of suffering in this world, and that desire to help every creature that is suffering can take something from us. And so I was thinking if we thought about it in units and we could recognize that we're not in like infinite supply of it, we can think about compassion as being like compassion efficient, like using our compassion in a more efficient way, the way like you would use fuel efficiency, right? Because fuel is also in sort of limited supply. So when we can focus on that and be more impactful with our units of compassion and keep our sort of compassion tank filled, then I think that we'll generally just feel better about ourselves and the work that we're doing or the love and compassion we're sharing with the world. So how do you fill up your compassion tank? By self-compassion, self-love, and taking care of yourself and not expecting yourself to like say the right thing, to be compassionate to every single person that comes along. And that, how do you know when you're running on empty in your compassion tank? If you're like telling yourself that you're not being compassionate enough, when you start judging and criticizing yourself that you're not doing it right and you're not enough, that's when your compassion tank is empty, I think. When is your compassion tank full? When you show compassion to somebody and you feel really good about it. So I just wanted to share those little thoughts and tidbits that I had sort of discovered on my own in my sort of conversations with all of you over the past weeks.
Can I just say, I would like to say, as far as compassion and empathy, I feel like I know when my compassion, I just know when I'm doing something without thinking about it. If I'm just compassionate, just like something, whether it's holding the door for somebody or the lady at the register is a few cents short. And I'm like, hey, and she's like, oh, I don't have any money. I'm like, I can give you 35 cents, not a big deal, Or, in our neighborhood, there's an elderly gentleman who has a really hard time with his yard, and I'm not very mobile. I mean, my stamina, my mobility is limited. I mean, I'm good, but I can't be out there for long periods of time. And so I've been trying to kind of coordinate with some of the neighbors and be like, if we just kind of all pitch in, like if I can do stuff like just collect like leaves or trash in his yard, and if somebody else is more mobile and has more strength and can kind of help mow the lawn, it's just, I kind of feel like I feel better about being compassionate and empathetic when it's just something that comes naturally. It's like, it doesn't cost me anything and I'm not really thinking about it and I'm not expecting anything,
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not looking for somebody to say, oh, you did a good job. If you think I did a crappy job, well, I'm sorry. I tried, it is what it is,
Yeah.
um,
And so how did you feel about that when you did that?
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't need somebody to pat me on the back and say, hey, Alona, you did good. I mean, I just feel good about it,
Yeah, I think that that's actually compassion when your tank is full. And it can be really that simple and easy. And it's honestly probably the way it's intended to be, compassion and expression. But I think the problem is sometimes when we have those expectations, like you just said, like if you do it with the expectation that someone's going to congratulate you for that, or with the expectation that that person should respond in a way that you want them to respond, right? I think when we have those attachments, that's like when it's not so simple, and that's when it starts to take away from us. So yeah, thank you. I think that's like a really good example of it being sort of just, a gift of yourself but it's not sort of like depleting you.
Make a help.
What? Bojana, did you want to talk about your email at all? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I've unmuted. Of course we can we can with pleasure. As I wrote you, we if you want to comment that. Generally, I wrote an email exchanging correspondence with. I wrote an email about the situation that I was in a little way touching on the previous session that I somehow struggle, maybe now a little bit less, but I still do struggle with the situation when my husband starts to feel like worse or weaker or bad. And my reaction, I consider it now, it's like overreacting, but my fear is overwhelming me, and I am trying to like get a reasonable approach to that, knowing that, okay, this is the situation, the sickness, it has its waves, now it's worse, it can be one day better and all of that. But I do struggle also in kind of a physical way. I'm recently sleepless because we have this little bit worse moment, and I have to try to find out a way out in my head from this situation of the fear that's simply overwhelming me. I have detected that the feeling is simply a fear, and I've been thinking, okay, the worst thing which can happen is that he will go to the hospital, he will be treated there, and okay, we know the path. But this makes me feel bad, simply.
Tell me what you're afraid of exactly.
I am afraid of the repetition of the attack, and that I see my husband being also very scared, and his behavior I sometimes consider like unreasonable, because the situation is honestly is not that bad, but it looks like he fears that as well a lot, and the fear in a very straight way and in a very quick way like comes to my head and to my body.
Okay, and you said that you become an expert at calming his fears.
Yes, because then I take a deep breath and I try to be in front of him. I'm always very brave and I think I'm always very reasonable, explaining that, okay, the worst thing can happen. We will go to the hospital and they will treat you there. Okay, it is what it is. But then I see if I don't, and I don't release my fears in front of him, they are invading my body in a way that I don't sleep in the night. Recently, it's very like 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock in the night is my time that I wake up, and then okay, I read or I go to watch something. But I think is this fear at the back of my head that on the level of reasonability, I know how to cope, but because with my head I can figure it out. But somehow it is, I don't know, so deep that the reasonable way of thinking, which usually I think I have, or at least in front of people, it doesn't work that well for myself.
Okay. Would you say that you think he's unreasonable in his fears?
I think that unreasonable in a way that the situation with his health, okay, as I said, it has its bad and it has its better and worse days, as with all this sickness. But I think he gets very quickly like overwhelmed, you know, shaky and sweaty, and during the night waking up and walking, and you know, this kind of, okay, what are you doing? What's going on? Okay, I don't feel my legs well, or I feel shaky, or I feel that it's coming, and all of that. And then I say, well, listen, on what can happen, nothing can be as bad, please calm down. Or if in the morning the situation is the same, then we will go to the doctor and we will take care about it. And what I see more and more, that now is the night becomes the moment of horror. This is, to me, and we have been in this for the last maybe 3 weeks, that I start already in the evening to be afraid about the night, because the night is like a nightmare. And it keeps repeating. And you know, we still at home, nothing has happened. Now he's not in the hospital. He's, I would say, okay, as it is. But the night becomes kind of a, and maybe this is on the top of the fear how to handle his fears, is the fear about the night, that I start to think becomes kind of a pattern, that, you know, we try to go to bed about 10 o'clock, and then I start thinking, okay, what time will he wake up? What time will I wake up? Because he wakes up and then he can go to sleep, and I cannot go to sleep. Which sometimes, you know, when you have 4 hours of sleep, like 3 days in a row, it's a bit tough.
Okay. When was the last time he had a relapse?
A year ago.
Okay. And how many relapses has he had?
2.
And when was he diagnosed?
Year ago, because he had the 2, well, little bit less, 8 months ago he was diagnosed. 8 or 9 months ago he was diagnosed.
Okay.
Because from the first relapse to the diagnosis, it was like 5 months, something like that.
Okay. So when you think he's being unreasonable with his fears, how do you feel?
No, I think, well, I can see that his health is like a wave. Sometimes the previous month, the month of August was, I would say, quite good. He started even to run, to exercise more. This month, the end of August, and now this month is terrible. Is terrible.
Because why is it terrible?
It's terrible because he says he feels his legs with all this like electrical symptoms, and he feels weaker and he cannot sleep. He wakes up. Then he has the issue with going to the toilet like 5 times per night sometimes, and sometimes not. So this becomes a topic of the morning always. And I think he's lacking the distance, and this is what I was explaining, and also the doctor was explaining, that the sickness has its better and worse moments, and you have to like cope with on both levels. And when the worst moment is coming, then I think he's not coping, and somehow I am in that round, not coping too well with him. You know, in front of him, yes, I'm very brave. In front of you, I can be, thanks God, very honest.
Yeah, you say that you don't release your stress in front of him, so you save it at night.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I think he always was taking me as a point of reference. And I think if he would see me that I am somehow, you know, like over worried or something, then he would thought that maybe I consider the situation like worse than it is, or something like that.
So how are you with him then?
generally very well, you know. Well, I'm joking, but we are fine. I'm trying to, you know, I take the point that he's ill, and I have to take care about him as with an ill person.
Okay. Again, I want to go back to this thought that you think he was being unreasonable about the fears.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is what I think, because I was, you know, it's very difficult to figure out how I would behave if it was me
Mm-hmm.
struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, it's easy to say, but you cannot prove it because you are not in the situation really. But
Mm-hmm.
I think generally I wouldn't be so shaky. Then, okay, going a step further, why I am so shaky in the situation, not being sick, but being like close to him, because I'm during these moments, I'm shaky in myself. I'm shaking in with a fear inside myself.
Okay. So when you say that you think he's being unreasonable about his fears, is it?
Yeah, that I refer to the fear, that the fear is, you know, it's too big and it's causing too much, like, I don't know, attention is a bad word, but too much of an issue during the night and all of that, in relation to the real, like, physical way he feels. He is, because, you know, he walks, he like almost is like almost normal. It's not that he cannot get up in the morning. No, he's just walking slower. He's weaker, definitely weaker
Mm-hmm.
recently, and I think this is all of that the fear comes. I think the fear is the following: that if a relapse comes, he will go to the hospital, of course, but he is afraid that the next relapse can bring more damage to his physics. This is the issue.
And what is your fear?
Mm, what is my fear? My fear is similar. That, again, as you were talking about the change, you know, when you were saying about the change, I remind myself the very beginning when we were fighting for the diagnosis. The first and the only thought I have in my mind, I have to do everything to get my previous life back. Everything and anything I have to do to get my previous life back. Okay, I didn't. The life has changed. Now I am definitely thinking that it has changed for something. You know, new opportunities have opened. I quit the job. We do stuff that we are like happy about, you know, the garden, the house, and things like that. Okay, I think I have accepted the change. I have accepted the change. Okay, sometimes I miss my previous life, but this is still, I believe, normal. But the fear is that our life will have to change even further, potentially having him disabled, for example. This is kind of a maybe blockage in my head that I think, okay, this I cannot imagine at this moment.
Okay, but he's not disabled. You said he can
No,
walk.
no,
And he so he's just a little bit weaker now,
yeah,
but he's able to walk.
yeah,
And he was able to run just a couple of months ago, you said?
exactly, exactly.
Okay.
A month ago, he was still able to run like a few miles for twice a week or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So,
Okay.
and I saw this was giving him energy. When the situation like turned into a weaker, then his energy is like below zero.
Okay. But then when does it sort of renew the energy? I feel like it's sort of an ebb and flow, right? There were strong days and then weaker days and strong days, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I
Okay.
think it's related with the sickness simply.
Right. Okay. So what, you're in this situation and you recognize that this is a change. What is a question that do you think you could ask yourself that could help you to sort of move forward?
What would be the question? I don't know, but I would tell strongly myself that I have proved during my whole life that no matter what happens, I will anyway cope with that, and that I will find a solution to that. This I
Right.
think I can say to myself. Because when this whole story started, and at the beginning he was not walking, the first thing when I thought, okay, maybe he will be not walking, I came back home, and you know what I did? I measured the staircase that we have to the first floor, checking if the lift can be applied or can be fixed. And that was the first thought. I thought, okay, or I will do the lift, or I will sell the house and I will buy a new house with 1 floor only. And then I thought, okay, I will handle the situation.
Right.
And I should maybe keep much more on repeating myself or reminding myself that whatever happens, I will anyway cope with the situation.
100%. You've already outlined your plan and how you could possibly manage sort of like the worst case scenario that you've created in your mind, which has not happened.
Exactly.
Right? It has not
Yeah.
happened. So in the present, he is just sort of feeling a little bit weaker lately. It's an ebb and flow. You've talked to the doctor and things are okay right now. And you have an ability to now know that if things change, that you know how to deal with it. You already have created a plan. You've measured the staircase. You can install the equipment. So if that happens, which it has not, you will manage.
Yeah.
And you've already come to manage a lot more than you have even, I think, realized from the start of the diagnosis to where you are now.
Maybe.
So
Maybe.
then, right. So then the question is, what are you actually afraid of?
Leave me with the question. This is a very good question. What I'm really afraid of. His sleepless night and his bad mood should not make me so full of fear that I cannot sleep. I need to think about it, what I'm really afraid of. I don't know. If that is that the grief after my previous life is not yet well over, gone.
So are you saying, oh, you don't think that you've processed the grieving of the loss? Yes.
Sometimes I expect that maybe still there is something in, like part of my head, I am thinking, well, okay, it has happened. We understand the situation, we have adapted to the situation, and it's nice. It's a new life, it's a different thing, it's a different story. We have much more time, which we never had. I can focus now more on, cooking or things that I always thought I would do when I would have more time. Part of them I do, part not yet, but I am thinking still of doing them. And but maybe very deeply in my head, the grief has not been yet fully proceeded, processed.
Yeah.
And leave me with a question, because I think I need to sit down and ask myself what makes me to fear so much that I cannot sleep in the night, because really from this perspective, nothing bad is happening, or nothing like that is happening that should make me and him the sleepless nights.
Right. Well, I do want to, and you can definitely think about this and email me, but I do want to know what your actual fear is. There's something below everything that you've talked about. Okay. But I'll leave you with that. But getting back to, you don't release your fear in front of him. What if you did?
As I said, I think he was the whole life taking me as kind of a reference point. And if I release the fear, I think he would think that the situation is really very bad. This is why.
Okay. How do you know that?
To see something.
That's my feeling.
It's so ridiculous.
Wait, what is that voice? Is that okay? Okay. So now,
not a professional chef.
how is it that belief that you don't think you can release your stress in front of him, how do you think that is impacting your relationship with him?
Do we have someone on the line or
I know. What is
someone
that
wants to
voice?
comment?
I feel like that's a background voice.
Mm.
Kayla M is unmuted. My screen's showing that's where that's coming from.
Oh, okay. She's okay.
I'm Denise. I was
Hey,
one of the
Denise.
people I guess new, but I was calling from my phone before and I don't know how to do the buttons. So I logged in through my laptop. So sorry about that. But
No worries.
and I
Denise,
don't want
where
to
are you
interrupt that.
from?
I'm
Where are you-
Gainesville, Florida.
Cool.
Yes. And but I was very, teary-eyed at some points when she was speaking because I can really, really relate to everything she said.
Oh.
So I'm the caregiver. My son is the patient. And he started symptoms. He just turned 13 and started, had severe symptoms and has been in a wheelchair since he was about 10 and a half. So we just got diagnosed about a month ago, really. So have been very, very dismissed by doctors. And so for me, like hearing all this, oh, it's anxiety and fear. And for me, it's not anxiety. I have anxiety from the trauma that we've been through. And the question that you asked her, kind of that underlying why we can't sleep at night or go back to bed, that kind of stuff. Sorry. For me, it's just feeling so helpless, not knowing what you're going to wake up to.
Mhm.
If you're going to wake up to the person that, has that energy or the one that just wants and needs to sleep all day, so it makes it hard to plan the day, stuff like that. So for me, I don't know if that maybe, relates to what you were speaking about, but that's what, kind of where I'm coming from with that. So sorry.
No need to apologize. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
I kind of feel like your situation, Denise, you're in very much like the acute phase of trauma. So I think the only thing I could offer you really is to give yourself so much grace and space to feel everything. I think we've all been there. It is so hard. When Nell was first diagnosed, I didn't know what to think or feel. Like I was in a state of panic, like chronically for about, I don't know, months really. And I didn't know what was going to happen the next and the next. And anytime she had a headache or she complained of any little thing, I just thought, oh my gosh, this is a relapse. Like, what am I going to do? Who do I call? What do I, it was just like, again, that panic state of of that kind of change and not knowing what's going to come next. And in time, you will see that there's a pattern of you know that this is okay. This is not a relapse. This is probably like a pseudo flare, or it's just that she's tired or he's tired in your case. All of that will sort of, I think, become clearer, but you are in a very acute state of trauma and just like so much love to you and give yourself grace.
And Denise, I would also say, so a couple of things. First of all, it's really nice to meet you. And I think it's incredibly courageous of you, as Maggie said, so early on in, what you're going through to join something like this. And just want to say, we're all here for you no matter what. You can email us, Facebook us, whatever. I'm sure everyone here agrees with that. So you have a family in us. You're not alone in this. And, I would also say, if I know boys are different than girls, especially at that interesting age of adolescence. But if your son ever wants to talk to maybe Nell, who has also been through this at such a young age, and other kids his age, we can also arrange for that. I think it would be very helpful for him too.
I agree. He's on the spectrum, so he's autistic, and which has also kind of been part of the struggle with getting him diagnosed, not able to kind of describe, the symptoms that he was feeling, or they kind of, denounced it to, times that he could barely even wear clothes because it just hurt his body so much. And they're like, oh, he's just sensitive because of his autism, it's always his autism. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So he's funny, like he wants, to not always be on camera and stuff, but I throw out those things. I am part of the MOG project and some of those Facebook groups, and his first positive MOG test came back a year ago at this point. Almost, it was the first one, and it was right around the time of the SRNA conference. like that weekend or that Friday before. And I was like, oh my God, this thing is happening right now. So I've been watching Samara, like even your podcast stuff for a while, things when things get posted. So you've kind of, been there for me and not even knowing it. So just because I was, getting so much miscommunication from the doctors and everything. And, some being like, oh, it's probably just a false positive, they'd rather it just think it was kind of, functional neurological disorder. And just, I mean, I felt some relief, or thought I did when we got that diagnosis officially. And it's like still the trauma continues because his record and the notes are kind of haunting us. His height, I don't know if it's a typical BOG thing or not. His height, he's barely grown the last 2 years. He was in like the 80th percentile for height and is now in like the 30th percentile for height. And to me, I'm like, you can literally see the growth charts and nothing's moving. And so, referred to endocrinology for that, as well as thyroid stuff. And the attending doctor, who didn't really see us, we saw and spoke with the fellow, but the attending doctor put in the notes, like, he suspects because of behavioral diagnosis is fictitious disorder. I'm like, what does that have to do with his, like, literally brought you data? You can see the growth chart and it's like, what is wrong with you people? Like, where these doctors get this stuff from? So it's just such a mistrust in the medical system. I'm a teacher of 18 years and had to resign, to take care of my son. Which is fine, but I'm a single mom, so I have to work. So, so just kind of not knowing where to turn to, because everyone just kind of leaves these incorrect medical notes, and trying to get them fixed and everything. So sorry, I didn't mean to get off track. So I'll make sure to mention, to my son that there's, people willing to talk with him. I think a lot of times he's handling it better than I am. Maybe because he doesn't understand some of the conversations happening at the appointments, but our lives have just definitely changed.
Yeah.
So,
Denise, I don't know if this is going to be useful to you, but Nell also wrote a book about her experience. I don't know. Can you throw that in the chat now, or maybe we can send it to you?
Yeah, I would love to actually send you a copy and like with a special little note.
Oh, that'd be great. It's something about like a dragon or something? Am I thinking of the right?
No, so it's basically called My Hospital Story, and it's about my own experience. I was diagnosed when I was 9. And so my life was really turned upside down, and situation changed, trying to go back to school and all of that. So I would love to be able to send you a copy, and maybe we can touch base after this, and I could get your address and send a little note or something for him.
I would love that. Thank you. I think I had heard at some point that someone had written a book and meant to get it. So I'm a book lover. So I would love that. Thank you.
And also, Denise, pediatric patients like care packages when we become aware of them. So like if you email, I'll put my email in the chat, but just email me his name, the address, and yeah, we'll send something to brighten his day a little bit.
Thank you. That'd be great.
I just want to say, like, sorry, I'm emotional just hearing your story. And it's so sad, but at the same time, I think about like how lucky we are to, like this brings me back to like my earlier days. And there was nothing. I couldn't meet anybody. I had nobody to talk to. So like as sad as I am for you guys, like I'm just so happy that at least we have each other and we have Maggie who shares such amazing things with us to help us through this. Nell, Scott, just all of us here. We're all, without even realizing it, making such an impact on each other's lives. And I'm just really grateful for that.
If I could just say something from the patient perspective, I mean, I know your son is younger, but Bozena, her husband is older, and I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not a pediatric and I'm not a geriatric, but I'm kind of going that way. And I am single, and my caretaker is my mother. And so she tries to be very strong for me. She is a very strong woman, but
Stop.
but
Oh, sorry,
sometimes
sorry.
you have to let the patient kind of take it on a little bit, because when I see my mom, I was at the stage, I'm being older again. I'm sure it might be different for a pediatric patient or a younger patient, but when you see that it's causing any angst or anxiety for your caretaker, it puts a lot on you, and me personally, I didn't want that for my mother. She had just retired. She'd spent her whole life working. She was a single parent. Now she's taking care of her adult daughter in her retirement stage, who is then, had become single. I was divorced. And so, it, I wanted her to be able to sleep. When I saw her and she looked tired, or she was frustrated, or there was any type of angst or anything, like, I kind of started to take that on. And so, I told her, I said, Mom, I said, I understood. Like, she would say, Ilona, I can't be here anymore. I'm so tired. I'm like, Mom, go home, go to sleep, go to bed, just try to get some rest. Or I didn't want her to be here as an adult all night with me anymore. When it got to a certain point, I was like, I'm okay. Like, I'm fine, and if I don't sleep, then I wake up in the morning and I'm tired. But hopefully she's gotten some sleep after having been with me all day, or the majority of the day, which is pretty much what she does. But I guess where I'm going this, as a caretaker, young or old patient, you guys need to take care of yourselves. I mean, don't feel guilty about that. You have to have self-love and self-preservation as far as rest, sleep. You need it. Otherwise you can't. I'm saying this selfishly, otherwise you can't take care of us, I mean, you can't be there for us.
Yeah, so true. Ilona, thank you so much for sharing that. I know we're getting near the top of the hour, but this is actually a really nice segue in where I was sort of going with Bojana. The question that I asked you is, like, how do you think it would impact your relationship with your husband if you maybe could release some of your stress with him? And I think, like, without putting thoughts in your head, and I know we're sort of limited on time, but what I was hoping to sort of get you maybe to consider is that the possibility of him maybe wanting you to share, and maybe a deepening of a connection between the two of you, and you not having to bottle it up. So just something to consider. I don't know the nature of the relationship, but just wanted to sort of get you maybe just to consider that idea. Also, I think the other thing I wanted to share was that, I don't know, again, I'm not putting a thought in your head, but when I was asking you about the fear, maybe explore the idea that, the situation that you're describing, you're very much alone. You're married, you have someone that you love with you. This is a journey you could take together. I wonder if the fear is something about an alone experience. So, without putting anything in your head, just something to think about. Email me if you want to meet, and we can have a coaching call. I'm happy to do that too, to process also. To you as well, Denise.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You guys are amazing. I really, really am happy that you joined us today, everyone.
Thanks for doing this, Maggie.
You're welcome.
You're amazing. Good job. That's awesome.
And also, Denise, I'm happy you talked about some of the medical stuff, because that is actually the third part of this 3-part coaching series. Is that because I'm a physician, next time in October, I'm going to actually do more of a presentation type style on ways you can sort of interact with healthcare, like your primary care doctor, the ER doctor, consultants. So, and Scott is also a physician and may be part of this. It's gonna be fun. So I guess should I conclude? We're at the top of the hour. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to the Smira Foundation for hosting this, and hope to see you all next month.
Bye, everyone. Have an amazing weekend. Bye.